YouTube has an easy gate to entry. You have to be able to rely on the one thing that you can, and that is
break that apart and repurpose it. You get so much content out of that. Pull out the transcript, take an hour-long video and turn it into a 30-second clip, a 3-minute clip, a 5-minute clip. Take the videos together and get some type of curated, bundled piece of content.
You also have to have a great grounding in what the trends are. If you just want to be here for a little while, no problem. Come in like Snapchat, disappear, we'll never see you again.
And we're back with another episode of the Niche Marketing Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John Bertino. Today, I'm in sunny San Diego with my new friend, JC Polk. JC, what's your title?
Here, I'm an executive producer and co-founder of OLAS Media.
Let's start off by having you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, how you got into this, how long you've been doing this, and what we should know about your background before starting OLAS Media.
Once I finished high school, I took it upon myself to go over to HBCU, Elizabeth City State University, which is in about 30 minutes from Nags Head. Part of what has happened there is that we've been able to learn about the stories and the plight of people of color at institutions of HBCUs, and it provides us with the confidence to be able to go and explore. And so from there, I went on to actually go teach marketing at an alternative high school. And while I was there, I was a marketing instructor and got bit by the bug of video. The students helped me to learn how to actually start editing video, really looking at what—
The students helped you.
Mm-hmm. Students helped me.
Yep.
I knew how to work a video camera, but to go in and start editing, I didn't know anything about it. And so we learned together. And so it helped me really understand and value, even to this day, the teaching and learning experience. Loaded up the wagon, headed west. The goal originally was to actually go to Australia. I was going to take a pit stop in California, country boy coming further west, but I didn't want to do LA. And so I decided to do San Diego.
And next best thing to Australia, right?
There you go. There you go. And it was in the precarious area, as you know, here in Mission Valley, ironically, where we are now. You have a lot of companies that question their marketing mix and what they need to add to it, to anything that you do. I argue to say that 100%. Anyone that's worth their salt now has at least the three components. They have a website, a hearty email campaign, and they have some other new form of media that they're experimenting with.
Right, because it's always content is king. But if you're just relying on written content, you're already behind.
Yeah, this is true.
And it's ironic because there's a direct intersection here between, certainly what I do on a day-to-day basis when you're doing, and I couldn't agree with you more. The multimedia is critical, right? It's going to give you a leg up. My background's in SEO, so I always think in terms of SEO. But among other things, it's going to give you a leg up in rankings to have something that's more engaging in the written content that supplements it, the links to YouTube and a number of other factors I could touch on. There's all this, hey, you got to get on social. Everybody's got to get on social. Mm-hmm. But if you're just doing still graphics and clever captions, not that you shouldn't be doing clever captions and the occasional still graphics, but you're at a major disadvantage to everybody that's using media. Even LinkedIn, as you see today, is video after video after video, and most of the posts that are just written, I tend to pass those. Mm-hmm. We could both give another 20 examples of why you got to be doing media right now. Actually, I'm going to give one more, which is the ability to take a piece of video content and break that apart and repurpose it. Pull out the transcript, take an hour-long video and turn it into a 30-second clip, a 3-minute clip, a 5-minute clip. Yep. Take the videos together and get some type of curated, bundled piece of content, like on and on and on and on. So video is where it's at. And I guess that was the realization that IVC had a long time ago. They were way ahead.
Well, I think it really goes back, when we talk to a lot of people who, either saunter in or just, cold call us and say, hey, we want to know what you guys are doing. A lot of things we always try to point out to them is really about being honest and upfront about who you are, your capacity, and what it is that you want to do, right? If you can identify that, each of the things that you just mentioned are absolute options for you. The question you have to ask yourself is whether or not you really believe that you can be the best at all of those, or is there something that is germane to your success that allows you to specialize in one of those, right? Because the question that we all have to ask, we can be very familiar with all the different elements of a great marketing mix, but we also have to be realistic about the budget that we have too, right?
It's so true.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so, the first thing that we try to sit down when we talk to them is to say, okay, what resources do you have, right? What is it that you really want to accomplish? And allow us to do the heavy lifting to make that connection and come up with the solution for you that fits both of those categories. Otherwise, you risk bastardizing your own brand, right? And then even for those who come to us without a brand, right? They just know, hey, we want to tell somebody about this, right? The question is, okay, let's really talk about what are you doing? Are you telling a story? Are you promoting something? Are you trying to impact someone? Are you trying to inspire somebody? We ask some of those tough questions. And I think a lot of times, what we've seen in our experience is by starting there, you would do two things. You remove them of the overwhelming capacity that it could be to hear all these things. Because the list that you just ran down is absolutely correct. We could talk about an infinite number of products.
So many options.
But we run into this paralysis where it's like, well, I have so many options. Where do I begin? And then it turns into, well, I'm just going to try to do this and I'm going to try to add that to it. But what if you took the time, what you were realistic about what it is that you want to accomplish and realistically put together a plan? And I think that's what we try to allow ourselves to do.
I love what you just said. I truly think it's brilliant. And yet I think that a lot of listeners would just go, JC basically just said you should have a strategy and you should prioritize spend before you do things. But it's more than that. And it's a very familiar conversation for me, right? Because if you're a sizable brand with a sizable budget, okay, fine. I mean, you're doing a little bit of everything and you still need to have a strategy, you still have to have a plan, you still need to be efficient, but you got money to blow, you got margin for error, it's a lot easier. But for your typical small emerging mid-sized business, call it sub 10 million a year, sub even 5 million a year, and that's most businesses, right? You don't have a lot of margin forever. You don't have a lot of time to waste. You need to take the most efficient path and means to an end to get the most out of your marketing dollars. You got to see it fast before you give up, go broke, pivot, run your company in the ground, whatever it is. And so you really need to be very thoughtful in where am I going to put resources, time, effort, energy, money. Absolutely. And the fact that you guys immediately, first things first, look at it through that lens and dissect it is powerful, incredibly important, and a sign of somebody that knows what the hell they're doing. And last things last, again, I think that's kind of the power of YouTube, or video, I should say, in general. As I had referenced earlier, the ability to take one output and turn it into many. Absolutely. Which a simple blogging strategy doesn't afford you that same luxury. But one video, again, you can get so much content out of that. You extract a lot more value out of one investment.
What we also deal with are those clients who come and say, okay, yes, I don't have a large runway like you were talking about. And I have this campaign that I need to, whether political or a municipal initiative, I need to get this. We vote on this come March, right? We need to get the word out. We need to get engagement to the community. We're equipped to be able to help people do that as well. And so that is the naming the initiative. That is putting together an email campaign that feeds into a live streaming event to educate people about it, to get them to come out to an actual party so that they can go and be prepared as a voter to either say yay or nay on that proposition in the course of 6 months, right? But the part of that question that we ask about being realistic about who you are is, what is that timeline for you, right? If you're talking about right now, I'm coming with minimal resources, but I really don't have a deadline by end of the year, allow us to put together a holistic, sustainable strategy, because it's better to allow you to come in and be methodical and purposeful and authentic to come in and design this so that by the time we want to look 2 years from now, we can honestly say, we can get you there. Here's how we're going to do it. Because one thing we do know about that media is that what it looks like today is not what it's going to look like tomorrow or the next year. And on top of that, yesterday's price is not tomorrow's price, right? And so by putting together this sustainable strategy, we take all of that in consideration, all the years of experience that we have working with different types of mediums, depending on what platform do you want to go to, what age group, what's your demographic, all of those questions that become very overwhelming for a lot of people are questions that we handle at an expert level. So I want to make sure I add some context to that, so that it's not just JC said that all I have to do is have a strategy. So
JC did not say that. You're putting words in your own damn mouth, JC. It's gold, Jerry. Seinfeld fan? Yeah, who isn't? All right. Perfect segue. And I knew you teed me up with that. You're a veteran. You know what you're doing. Perfect segue. We do want to drill down a little bit on like YouTube shows in particular. One of the first steps is solidifying that brand, defining that brand identity, and then everything kind of stems from there. So let's just talk about that a little bit. What is the process that you typically go through, specifically for a YouTuber, to help them define a brand identity? What does that process look like?
Well, normally we want to look at what you have existing, right? We want to look at what has been the experience of this brand. Oftentimes you'll see, even to the layman eye, you can see when a brand tries to jump from A to B with no bridge in between, and it just doesn't work. And so we try to create that launching pad to get you to that next step. And so we're going to ask that question: what did it used to look like? And again, where do you want to go? How aggressive do you want to be? Are we really talking about that you're going to be able to post 4 and 5 different times, plus with the shorts, and to be able to make sure you got your descriptions right? We need to know what your capacity is to operate on this level, because otherwise we can't put you together a strategy. But specifically what we say is authenticity. Let's build off of that, because what we all realize now is that YouTube has an easy gate to entry and for participation. So when it comes to differentiating your brand itself, you have to be able to rely on the one thing that you can, and that is your authenticity. Because if you're true to thyself and the service that you provide to the people or the product that you provide, the people will see it. I think a lot of times, and I talk to this when I'm talking to my son and stuff, I don't even believe that people that have not seen as many moons as you and I realize the gift that they've been given by being able to differentiate between good quality content and just content that somebody never gave any thought about, and content that's just for the sake of just faking you out, right? They go through so much content and have gone through so much content that their ability and their radar is almost inherent versus those of us who have had to see the iterations of what YouTube looks like. So we try to stand on authenticity, right? Yep. But you also have to have a great grounding in what the trends are and accept the fact that these trends are going to change daily, right? Almost as often as the algorithm, right? And so if you understand that, now we can really talk about how aggressive are you prepared to actually be. And we just try to teach that this is going to change, and you have to be in a solid situation to be able to be malleable enough, athletic enough to be able to change just as quick, just as fast, and pivot. And what we do today may not knock it out of the park, but what we can do is put you in the best situation possible that whatever you make an attempt to swing at, that you can get on base, right? There's some fundamental things that you can do to do that.
Noted. I think that's great feedback. But what about those guys that are just getting started? They don't have an existing brand, but they know they want to put out content, and they need your help in establishing both the brand aesthetic or brand identity as well as the brand messaging. Do you have a typical process you might run folks through for that type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we have an by comparison, I would say we have an extensive type of brand roadmap. We sit down and we do an initial interview. You sit down with us, and over the course of about 30 to 45 minutes, we go through and ask you, who are you? What is your product? What is your service? What is it that you want to be? I think I got from a webinar just this week, they were talking about, we spend a lot of time thinking that it's just to do, right? If we start talking about 9 out of 10 people, you would sit there and say, okay, you want to do this? The first thing you do, I'm going to Google, how do I, right? Instead of, what do you want to be? Because if we take that being of your product or service and pour that into your actual brand and can make that manifest into a visual representation of that, we've already scored major points with whoever sees that. It becomes attractive. It now looks at something that I want to do, or something that I want to be a part of, or that I'm even curious about. And so once we establish that, now let's talk about how are we going to refer to that. We're just talking about the visual when we're talking about the logo, or when we start talking about the brand and the brand identity, we're talking about who are you and what's the culture that your business is in, and how do we convey that to the end user, right? And so part of that roadmap is sitting down, and for us, it may sound very laborious, but it is just asking the question. That has been the strength that we've stood on, right? And our success is being able to make sure that we can make that representative in your end product. And again, because it comes back, I personally believe, let me put on my JC hat, is that the authenticity is what will give you the actual niche over anything else, right? You can have a piss poor product, but if someone sees that, well, you didn't try to dupe me, you're going to be in a better place than if someone says, oh, well, you told me that this was the moon and the stars, and it's not. This is just, right? So I just personally stand on authenticity. And sometimes, I think we were talking before, it conflicts with being in that path of, I just want to get paid. I just want to get paid. But true to thyself, kind of like a pun, but true to thyself, I try to make sure that when we're talking to clients, that's what we let them know, that it's the authenticity that needs to be represented in their brand in order for them to garner the attention of those who they want to serve or provide for.
Again, I think there's something so deep and special in what you're saying. And so I'm going to riff here for a minute. And I'm noticing it's becoming common in the lexicon of entrepreneur best practices. And those that have been there and done it are starting to hone in on this idea of the most valuable gift you have to offer is your most authentic self, which sounds like perhaps some hokey bullshit. But when you really take a look at that and try to embrace that concept, it is extremely powerful. And again, it's starting to become common speak from the most successful people, at least arguably on the planet, right? The one guy that comes to mind is a gentleman, Naval Ravikant. I've been listening to a lot. This guy is a genius. And he's, among other startups, he did Angel's List. And he's the type of guy, when you just hear him talk, you go, whoa, that guy is serious. And he did what is essentially a famous tweet storm, which I know sounds funny, but it's a famous tweet storm about essentially how to get rich, an actual playbook on, if you needed a playbook on how to get rich, this guy, it takes 3 hours. He did a tweet storm and then did a 3-hour podcast summarizing the tweet storm. And one of the key steps is understanding there's only one you. And if you really can get to the heart of what you're about, what your strengths are, and you find the best way to deliver, and now here's where I'm going to butcher it because I'm not Naval Ravikant and I can't convey it back like him, but you get to the heart of who you are, what you're about, what your unique strengths are, and you find a way to turn that into something that you can monetize. That is one of the keys to getting rich. And I would reference just checking out his tweet storm and his podcast. You get a better version of that. But it's also the key takeaway from a famous book called The Go-Giver, which is at this point probably like a decade old. The Go-Giver was a big smash hit about ultimately sales, but it was like unselling, if you will, getting away from classic approach to sales and instead finding, a more value-based approach. And one of the hidden takeaways to almost like give you one of the keys of the book was, again, the most powerful thing you have to offer is yourself. The example in the book is actually a realtor or a real estate agent, and it's based on a true story. And she was incredibly successful. When they really drilled down, like, what is it that makes you so successful? She said she knows how to be her most authentic self in interactions, and that's really the key to her success. And I think ultimately, in a lot of ways, that's kind of what you just said. When you get down to the heart of it, whether you're an individual or you're a business, and you can kind of help extract that from someone and give them the guidelines to stay on course, it is so incredibly powerful in producing great content. Now, last things last on this, it's way easier said than done. And I generally don't struggle to be, I'm relatively extroverted by nature. And I'm relatively good at speaking by nature. And I'm comfortable kind of giving my expertise on topics by nature. But putting myself in front of the camera over and over and over again and being authentic is surprisingly hard. It's hard not to give like hokey bullshit like intros and come off as whatever it is. It takes practice. And if I wasn't a marketer by trade, I would desperately need that experienced marketer to provide me that blueprint to help me do it better, because again, it's so mission critical.
I don't know that I have involved to, but one of the things that I would think about, as you said, there were two quick things, is one, I think it's almost the reverse engineering, because what happens, you just said it yourself that I am this, I am this, I am this. I just am. This is who I be, right? But as soon as I turn the camera on, it becomes difficult.
Totally.
Right? Andre 3000, he talks about one of the reasons why he enjoys putting on an actual uniform every day is because it affords him the opportunity not to concentrate about which pants, what shirt, what hat, what pair of eyeglasses. Uniform says, I'm going to put that on. If you are truly being yourself, it's the easiest thing that you could do, because you're going to be that anyway. We spend far more time trying to be what we are not, or try to mask what we really are, than anything else. And so I think when you start talking about the mentality of being able to look at it from the standpoint of, oh, it's hard to be authentic. No, it's hard not to dress up and hide who we really are. And so I think the same thing happens when we start looking at our brands, right? We sit there and let's say if I'm in the business of making mugs, right? And let's say Stanley next year decides they want to go in and make mugs. The first thing that I do is I look to a standard to say, oh, well, Stanley is the most successful company that put out mugs last year. That must be who I have to be. Not true. You need
the fastest way to failure.
There you go.
or an undifferentiated product.
Possibly. Now you possibly could say that is my goal and that's where I want to go. And in that same scenario, maybe you do accomplish that. But in terms of difficulty and ease, I'm saying it's far easier and thereby possibly being more cost effective if you are who you already are versus trying to be something that you are not. And so I totally get your point. I step out there. I'm not a master of any stretch of imagination. I get up every day. I'm not wearing a uniform.
We're all practicing. Right? We're all learning.
Right? But I think those are the type of conversations. This is why I value what you're doing, is because these are the conversations that I think offer a great opportunity to not only enlighten people, but to really start changing the landscape in which we're all functioning in. Because we all feel like the reason why I keep bringing up authenticity too is because we seem to be more and more approaching a place where everything is now the more artificially intelligent, right? Yeah. And so what will stand out then is when you actually have something that is actually genuine and pure, right? Like organic food versus all of those GMOs, right? If we put all that together in the course of what we do on an everyday basis, I am willing to bet the things that I've learned and experienced, what will rise to the top over a period of time, and to those who I actually want to be consumers, curators, and aficionados or appreciators of what it is that I do. If you're wooed and awed by whatever quick wham, bam, thank you, ma'am type of thing flies by, that may be you're not my audience, right? And so tying it back in when we go back into what we advise customers to do when it comes to YouTube and things like that. Yes, there are tools by which can help you to get things fast, quick, in a hurry, faster to market, cheaper. But the thing about it, we all know what those tools are. And those
There's no unique advantage there.
Right. Even today, as much as I embrace and I as I said, I talk to my son and my daughter about, yes, embrace chat. You need to know artificial intelligence and know how to leverage it to accomplish what you need to do, but you need not to be dependent on it. And I think that's the most important thing that we can teach about it, because it is a tool and a means to an end, but it is not the one-to-one solution that everyone may think it is. And once you look at it that way, the fear can be eradicated. And so now that's what we've always done, right? Any new medium that we found a way to make it work for what it is that we wanted to do. The hammer came and we wanted a drill. We had a drill and then we wanted to find something else. And so it's just an iteration. And so these are the type, I don't mean to, go down this wormhole, but these are the type of conversations.
Too late.
that we sit down and we enjoy having not only with our clients, but in the content that we produce in a lot of our shows. And because it transcends not just in marketing, but now what if we open up that conversation, apply the same logic to, okay, law enforcement? What if we apply that to public relations, and that we have a podcast that's about that? We have podcasts about true crime, even our true crime podcast, that we now dovetail into bringing legislators into a conversation to talk about who are you at your authentic self and what do you really believe about what happened in this episode or in this case.
That's a really good, you gave a couple really good examples, I suppose, of how to elevate above mediocre content, putting your unique spin. I love that. Let's get a little bit tactical, right? So I think authenticity is certainly one of the most important keys, but we've covered that. Going beyond that to the degree that is possible, let's just talk about other things you can do to make your video content more engaging, more sticky, even if it's nuanced and tactical.
I think part of it is making sure that however you go about creating it, is that something that you're going to be committed to, right? You don't want to come with one-offs, right? Because if it's talking about being a brand, you want it to be adjacent to what it is that you're doing,
consistency.
Right? And you want that common thread to go through, so that even if they don't see that logo at the end, they can have within 1 out of 3 guesses to say, that was John. I know that's John, or I want to know what that is, right? And so I think it's very important to make sure that there's a level of consistency there in everything that you do. I mean, and across platforms, right? How many times have we seen that client that comes in and they've got this logo here, but it doesn't transition here, and right? And to try to get them to understand that this is why we use these colors, this is why we use that font. And really understanding the science behind it. Again, I think a lot of times we find people who just want to rush to get it done versus doing the due diligence to make it happen. And so to me, those are the tactical things, like the couple of the details that we actually look at.
Yeah, it's the old Abraham Lincoln. Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree. I'll spend the first 4 of them sharpening the axe. Right? Planning, and more planning. It also has other side benefits as well, such as, less squandered time, effort, energy, and budget on mistakes because you took the time to plan. Another one of our guests on one of our other series, like rooted in video production, coincidentally, made the point that if you plan and you can efficiently start to act or execute on that plan when you're in actual production, it gives you more time for mistakes, which is kind of an ironic, contrarian, oxymoronic statement. But like, if you've planned, that lowers the amount of mistakes, but mistakes will inevitably happen anyway. But when they happen and you need to pivot, it's less painful because you've got room to work with because you did so much planning. Otherwise, if you didn't plan, those mistakes are going to come up even more, and it's going to squander your budget, your time, your resources, your energy, all those things. So
yeah, and I think it's worth noting that beware of the paralysis, right? The planning paralysis. There's a fine line between let's sit down, do the outline. Okay, now let's do the strategic plan. Now let's sit down and see what our KPIs.
30 hours of market research.
Right. So yeah, I think I don't want to be caught that I was up here and I didn't say, that happens. So try not to let that happen.
And we are, I'm a line, man, because it's like, and this is coming from the guy that represents, like almost 300 agencies. Yeah, you got branding, you got brand strategy, but then you got just branding ripoff. Right. And we can debate till we're blue in the face what exactly that is. When a small business is getting hit $100,000 to $300,000 for brand planning, something might be wrong.
Yep. Some they used to say something in the milk ain't white.
Yeah. All right. One thing we didn't really get into, and we'd be remiss not to, on the path of creating the most engaging content, just riff on storytelling a little bit for me, would you?
TD Jakes has something that he talks about that's similar to this, and he says, regardless of
gospel singer?
No, pastor. Okay. Yep, out of Houston.
He's a singer or no?
No, pastor. I mean, he can. I mean, he's a gospel preacher, so yes, he can sing, but that's not his number one.
I know I worked at a record store for years.
Okay,
and I think that's how I know the name. But maybe they would just record him. And
possibly. I mean, it's known. I mean, you have. I mean, I can go down the list, but even Aretha Franklin's dad, Reverend Franklin, Cleveland Franklin, was actually, he put out albums, but he was a preacher, and then his daughter wound up being Aretha Franklin. So yeah, gotcha. Gospel preacher, a lot of music. But yes, he has the church out of Houston, Mass Church, mega church, as they refer to it. But what he talks about is that whenever you stand in front of someone, or anytime you have a presentation, all you're doing is you're wrestling with a group of people and trying to get them to see a common thought and a common point. And I think that comes into play when it's about storytelling. I have a soft spot in my heart from when I was in elementary school, and we would sit in Miss Lucas's class, and I look forward to story time, crisscross applesauce, and we would sit down, and there are two things that would happen. I would hear her voice, and I would with anticipation, wait for her to turn the book around and show me what the picture looked like. Because in between those two moments, it allowed my imagination to work, and it was a muscle in which that I love to flex. So I always tell people, if you can recreate that to an audience, to a mass audience, and then in that, not with shall we turn the page, but a call to action, you have now created a successful storytelling situation, and we can do it every day. Part of it is, what have I heard about you? What do I know about you before I actually see you as a brand? That goes directly into what your email marketing looks like. How does it coincide with the blogs that you were talking about? What did you look like in social media when I didn't have the opportunity to actually put that JPEG, that GIF, that video plug, or anything in there? What were you look like before you got on LinkedIn? Being able to go back to that fundamental feeling of filling in that gap of what did it look like between what they thought you were and what you actually reveal yourself to be is the act of storytelling to me.
Remind me a little bit of that Jeff Bezos quote, which is, your brand is who you are, was what people say about you when you're not in the room. Any other tactical takeaways or recommendations for the audience about just creating the most engaging YouTube content?
Yeah, I try to, when I do take the opportunity to actually be in front of the camera, I try to give an homage to my dad because, he will tell you that he's the best storyteller that ever lived. And he'd tell you that's a true story that he made up, right? and one of the things that I love about that is that we all yearn to hear a story. I led off our conversation talking about the stories that HBCUs were able to tell. The story that I garnered there in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, is the story that inspired me, that impacted me, and basically influenced me to do things and go above and beyond what I understood the status quo was. And what I mean by that is that as we sit here in Black History Month, to be able to have the privilege and honor to tell a story, the last thing I want to do is tell the story wrong. And I want to make sure that story does impact, inspire, influence, and make sure that it moves someone to do something greater than what already exists. Now, it may sound very esoteric and may sound very lofty, but I truly believe that if we approach anything that we do related to our brand with that same level of authenticity, then we wage a far better chance of actually getting to that sustainable path that stands the test of time, that can transcend all the different trends and all the different types of mediums that actually happen. There's a reason why when we sit there and look at a Ford truck that people can talk about Henry Ford, there's a story that goes along there. That story didn't happen 50 years ago. It didn't happen 2 years ago. That story has been told over and over again. And again, has transcended many platforms, and they're brands that we can talk about all the time. So from a tactical standpoint, and again, forgive me for try to sound so academic, but I think part of it starts here because I said, you have to figure out who you want to be. If you just want to be here for a little while, right? No problem. Come in like Snapchat, disappear. We'll never see you again.
It's not going so well.
Right. But if you really want to talk about it, and here's maybe what alludes to another conversation. I know we're about out of time, but then you look at the newspaper. For as much as everyone wants to talk about newspapers not being here and not having the same presence, the fact of the matter is that they're still here and they still exist amongst all this medium. Now, I'm not saying one is against the other. I'm not saying one is best. But what I am saying is that there is something to sustainability, and you have to make the idea and the decision on how you're going to sustain yourself, your brand, your service, your product, and your audience. And if you can't tell the story or don't have a story to get you there, you'll just be fly by night.
A great note to end on. Don't forget to sharpen the axe. And JC, it was so great having you on the show. I mean, I get the impression we got a lot more to talk about, so we'll consider this part 1, and we'll pick up part 2 maybe next time I see you.
Well, it sounds good. It sounds good. If you wanted to learn more about what it is, because I probably didn't do the best job in telling our story because I was so engaged in talking to you. IBC.media is a great place to start that research, and OLASmedia.com is a great place to kind of see some of the podcasts that we put together.
Thanks for letting the audience know. JC, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
See you next time.
This was fun.